Now this method is a little more exotic than the others. What we're going to do is make a model, then attach it to an invisible train. We're going to use the Metrocop model and have him walk, but this method can work on any object you see in the game. This method gets used all over the place in Galaxy Gold. All the spaceships flying around, the car pulling up to the gas station, the dragon at the end, even the mob scene where the dwarf gets chased all use this method. It does involve a lot of trial and error, but you can accomplish things that might not be possible otherwise. So the first thing we should do is delete the stuff we don't need. So select these info nodes and scripted sequence and delete them. Next you can delete the AI relationship and even the Metrocop himself. After that, let's go and create a path for our train. This is going to be very similar to path corners, except this time they're called path tracks. So go to the Entity tool and select Path Track. Place it in about the same place. And this part is mostly a repeat of before. Double click on it to give it a name. I'm going to call it Train Track. Then hit Apply. So close this window. Now go to the top-down view again. And just like before, hold down Shift and drag the path track to make your path. And actually, I'm going to select all of these and move them up off the ground slightly. When I was testing this method earlier, he was literally dragging his feet, so I want to try to avoid that. And if you go and double click on this entity, I want to show you that you have some more options with this than you would with a path corner. Like notice New Train Speed here. You can actually tell the speed to change after it passes over each section of the entity. For now, we'll keep it a constant speed. You can also change the orientation, meaning the direction it's facing. It can follow the path, or it can look in one direction, etc. Anyway, that's something worth knowing. You've probably noticed by now I've skipped over a bunch of options when working with entities. That's because I don't have enough time to cover every aspect of each one, so I'm trying to focus on what I consider the most important. I encourage you to research any options you see on these entities. These are just to get you started. Okay, so close that window again, and we're going to create our train. Now our train is just going to be an invisible block. So to create one, we need to go to the brush tool here, and now go to the top-down view again like we're creating a trigger. It doesn't have to be large, a small one's fine. Once you have an outline, go and press Enter. And oops, I skipped ahead by accident. I tested this before I recorded and the program still remembered some of my settings. This is actually the texture we want, but let's pretend it's not. So make sure your brush is selected, and click on the Texture tool, and click on Browse. And notice how I started to type invisible in the filter here? We'll do that, and we're going to want to select this magenta texture that comes up. So double click on it, then close the window, and it should be the right texture now. As you can probably guess, this texture will show up as invisible inside the game. We don't want to actually see our train, it's just there to help move our object. Oh, and it doesn't matter where you put your train in the map. If you set it up correctly, it will always start at the first point on your path track. So I can cut and paste it way over here and it won't make any difference. Oops, ignore that. What we want to do now is turn this brush into a train. To do that, it's the same method we used on the trigger earlier. Right-click on it in the wireframe window here, then click on Tie to Entity. And we want to change this to a function track train. And we want to set a couple values here. We need to give this a name. I'm going to call it Train. The next important one is our first stop target. This is where the train will start when the map loads. We want this to be the name of our first point on the track, which I call Train Track. Even though that train is right there, it's going to start over here. Alright, most of these values are self-explanatory. Max speed is an important one since that determines how fast your train can go. The default value of 100 is good for a walking pace, so we'll leave it at that. So hit Apply and Close. Now our next step is to add the Metrocop to this, except this time we're going to use a dynamic prop. So click on the Entity tool and select Prop Dynamic like we did earlier. And here your position does matter since it's going to be relative to wherever your train is. We'll put it next to it for the time being. Now let's define this. Press Select and double click on it. And notice the first value here, Parent. If we give this prop a parent, that means it'll move wherever our parent does. So as you may have guessed, we want to make this train the parent. So go ahead and type in train here. Now click on World Model, then Browse. And oops, here's some more leftover work of mine. Go ahead and type in police for the filter name, and when it comes up, select the police model. And under info it says dynamic, so we're okay. So click OK, now apply. Now we can see that it has the Metrocop there, but we need to give him an animation to run, otherwise he'll just stand there with his arms out and hover. But in order to do that, we need to get the name of the animation we need. So go and click on the Model tab here. Man, I'm just spoiling everything. Well, again, Hammer remembered what I already did. Walk All is the animation we want. So highlight it, right-click on it, then click on Copy. Go back to Class Info, and we want to go to... where is it? There it is, Default Animation. Go and right-click and paste that value here. Now press Apply. I'm going to go back to Model for a second to show you what this would look like normally. If you didn't enter that value, he would just look the way he does now and not animate at all. So what we did was make him look like he's walking when he moves. Alright, so go and close this and oops, the world is falling apart on me. Okay, that's better. Actually, I forgot a value we need to change on the train, so double click on that again. Go to Flags and check Passable. This will make the train non-solid, so it won't get hung up on anything. More importantly, it'll make sure the model won't collide with it. And another option that won't hurt is unblockable by player, meaning just like a real train, it will not stop just because you stand in front of it. Now click Apply and Close. Now let's reposition our cop so he's centered right with the train. It looks like he's a little bit above the ground there. I could move him closer, but I don't know exactly how this is going to look if I do that. Again, I ran into issues with his feet tracking when I tested this earlier, which screwed up the animation, so I want to avoid that. He may hover above the ground a little bit like this, but again, there's a lot of trial and error in using trains. I'll go ahead and leave him like this. Oh, and something I should mention. Notice how our cop is facing off into the distance here and not the direction we want him to go. Believe it or not, this is actually set up correctly. Let's zoom out for a second. For some strange reason, when you set up your train, everything needs to be oriented towards the east here. So if you have an object attached to a train and it's facing east, that means it's going to face forward with your train whenever you run it. So if I were to turn this guy to face the store, he would be facing where we're standing when we started the map. I don't know why this is, but it's just the way of things. Alright, the only thing left for us to do is tell this train to start when we walk over the trigger. So double click on that again. Then go to Outputs, and we can just modify the last value. For target entity, we want train, and the command we want is start forward. Hit Apply, Close. Then when we walk over the trigger, our train will start moving and our cop will be animated to start walking. So let's run this. Go to File, Save As. I'm calling this Motion 4. Save. Now File, Run Map, OK. You probably know this, but every single form of life on Earth needs water to survive. That's why it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when I see science fiction movies and they have aliens that are vulnerable to water. Yeah, right. If we come across a life form that doesn't need water to survive, it's going to look really weird, like a crystal or arcs of electricity or something. Here we go. Well, looks like I guessed wrong. He's walking on air there. I guess he's wearing Nikes. It's just trial and error. Let's watch him walk anyway. Well, it's not completely natural looking, but it can look better with fine-tuning, and it's an option for trickier situations. So this concludes character motion. Let's learn more mysteries of animation next.